There we go. Maybe I should make a Dear Becky and Lizzy sticker sometime. Sometime. For now. It'd be so much more artistic to slide it the other way and have this disappear last.
Yeah, but you know.
But my arms don't go that way.
And then you'd have your arm in the camera.
Ooh, it likes to pucker. Look at that. Yeah. Then no, if I did it, I'd have to. Never mind. I should go stand over there. Good morning. We were twinsies. Did you notice? Look. Unintentional. We both put those on before we came in.
I was like, ooh, I found a mask in the bottom of my bag and it's clean and
clean is
it
good.
matches my dress mostly. So
clean is good.
Yeah.
Good morning and welcome to the Sun Dragon Sideshow.
The Dear Becky and Lizzy edition.
I'm Rebecca. I'm the owner of Sun Dragon Art and Fiber in very, very rainy and probably getting more nasty downtown Brevard, North Carolina. Known as Becky on Thursdays only while we're filming.
I'm Liz, or Lizzy, the Minion at Sun Dragon Art and Fiber. Yeah, there.
One question we have to answer is about that, so I'm turning it. Before we start, I wanted to show off this lovely, it's rainy and nasty out, so the lighting doesn't really show this off. But you know how we talked about this yarn yesterday? The Mano Puyu and lovely colors, yay! And nice naturals too. Shout out to Cheryl, she's already scarfed a whole bunch of it. But I went home. I think we were talking on camera about how I should find a one skein project. I did. I made it. I haven't blocked it, so it's a little floppy. This top part might get a little less floppy with blocking. That is one of the downsides of straight cowls. What?
Yeah, I was thinking something and then realized it wasn't, so never mind.
Okay. That's one of the things about straight cowls like this, that it's a little bit annoying, but kind of hard to control. Here, if I put it at an angle like this, you can see the lovely stitch work. It has a super stretchy bind off, almost maybe too stretchy. But look at that. It's called a daisy stitch, and there are different versions of this, but this is the, hang on, I got it here. I think it's the Tequiliana is the name of it. It's in my morning meditation if you want to see me making these really cool daisy stitches. This got jammed into a bag, so it's a little rumpled, but this is the Tequiliana by Millie's Knit Designs. And I still had this much left over. It calls for, it's written for Rasta on a 17, and this is a little bit thinner. I did it on a 15, so it would be a little wider. If I'd done it on a 17, it would have used up a little bit more yarn, but I'm very happy with how it came out. It took next to no time to make. Look at that. Yay! She has instructions on how to make it using a crochet hook to dip down and get these fun guys and pull them up. I just use my needle because I'm lazy. And I've done enough of these dip down type patterns that I can do that pretty easily. But check out my minute of meditation video on Instagram or Facebook if you're curious. One skein. This would look lovely in so many different colors. She's done it holding it with a strand of something else. I would do this on a 17 if, say, I held it with a strand of sparkling mohair or something like that. It's so pretty. But I have to move on. One more thing I'm going to mention before we get to our questions. I
started new projects.
I did a gauge swatch last night. And I said, what do you think it is, everybody? And I had some really interesting guesses. But this is for Caitlin Hunter's Jupiter crop. I've got some lovely colors. Again, go to Instagram or Facebook to see them. I'm not going to pull them all out right now. The lighting is such, this is kind of hard to see from back there. I think that's going to be really pretty.
I think it's going to be really pretty.
The last time I made a Caitlin Hunter sweater, it said to do it on a 5. And I swatched in the round. Can you see this? So I did it on 2 circulars. I've got about 3 repeats of the pattern on both sides. I didn't do a whole lot. I probably should have done more, but again, I'm lazy. Sarah Beth said on Instagram, she said, you know what I tell you about gauge?
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Sarah Beth doesn't gauge. I do, because guess what? The last time I did Caitlin Hunter, it was the Soldatna. And I made it out of this cotton that's kind of thinner than what's called for. And she said to do it on a 5. I got gauge on a 7. at least. I think I even might have gone up to an 8. Lately, it's really weird. I'm not a tight knitter, but lately I've had to go up on a lot of different sweater patterns. Like this was written for a size 5 needle. It's a thinner yarn though, so I ended up having to do it on a 7. I did my gauge swatch on a 5 for this Caitlin Hunter. It might not just be Caitlin Hunter because this is not. This is Stripes by Andrea Mowry. I did my gauge swatch for this guy on, and I consider myself usually pretty on gauge.
Yeah.
I mean, on gauge is a relative term, but I'm usually fine.
Pretty average.
I'm supposed to have 20 stitches, which again, for a sport weight yarn is kind of big. So on a 5, I have 24 stitches. So I'm probably going to have to go up to a 7. Apparently I have to knit everything on a 7. But I'm glad I swatched.
Well, with the Caitlin Hunter, it's also color work.
Mhm.
So you know, depending on
and she
light and
says,
yarn.
yes, and she says to knit it and block it and everything else. And it's true. If I blocked this, I could probably, and I'm going to do a little stretchies and things, and maybe I'll reassess. If I block this, there's a good chance I could get gauge. But I like to have it pretty much to gauge before I block so that while I'm trying it on and knitting it, pre-blocking, I know if it's going to fit. And then when I block, I don't yank on it a lot. I just settle it in place and make sure it fits the measurements, and it's usually pretty good. But this sweater is going to be made out of Juniper Moon Patagonia. It's so squishy. I'm so excited. I can't wait. I know I should be working on a different sweater right now that's already on needles, but I've earned it. So, and look, I've already finished a project for the weekend. I'm still going to try to finish something else. We might circle back to goals if there's time. I'm still going to try to finish one of the projects that's currently going instead of just new project already done. Yay! I mean, I almost feel like that's cheating, but you know.
I started another one, so I'm not going to.
Yeah, she started another Papillon, people. I mean, that's awesome. But what?
It's been in the works for like a while. I just needed the yarn, and I finally found the yarn. Like, I wanted a shawl that looks like sunset, and I finally found sunset yarn, and then I supplemented the sunset yarn with night and sky colors, and there's some tree colors, and it's gonna be perfect. And I was gonna find another pattern for the yarn to do it, and turns out that the best pattern I could find was the Papillon, and I'm doing the contrast in dark brown, so it looks like you're looking through a window.
It's cool. And this is a dark brown that's a new yarn. Well,
New
yarn
to
we already
us.
have. New color.
New color.
New color. The Friday Harbor, we got a dark, rich brown in. Oh my gosh, it's gorgeous.
Oddly enough, it's called dark brown, but it looks like a milk chocolate.
It's a logical name. Go figure. No. I'll see if I can get pictures
Or
of
not
that.
a milk. It's almost a dark chocolate. It's really pretty.
Yeah, it's between milk chocolate and dark chocolate. We only had like a taupe in that anyway. So, sorry, I'm using my handy, this thing's really cute and inexpensive, handy gauge roller. And you put that over your knitting. It doesn't work with everything and it's only got a small range. And I was tugging on the stitches and I still think I'm getting 6 stitches to the inch, which, yeah, I'm going to have to knit it on a bigger needle. I think it's still going to look lovely on a bigger needle. And the drape will be better on a bigger needle. So if I can hit gauge on a bigger needle, that drape is how it hangs. Like this one, it's a little puckery, but this one, it flows and it's nice and it's not stiff. Anyway, I digress because we have lots of questions today. Where do we want to start?
We could start with the quickest.
Yes,
and
I think that's good.
Then go from there. Dear Becky and Lizzy, please tell us what kind of ball winder that is above Becky's head in Tuesday's episode. Sincerely, Marooned on Afghan Island.
I almost want to turn the camera to show it out of the box, but give me a second. I'm going to try not to make anybody dizzy, but this is our signature ball winder. This is the winder we have in the shop that we have to like every 6 months we need to crack open a new one because
6 to 9.
because we wind so much yarn. It depends on, like, they're individual. They're mass produced kind of, but they can be quirky.
They have feelings.
They so some last longer than others. But,
And generally, just so you know, we wind about 100 balls of yarn a month, and we replace them just after 1,000 balls wound.
so it's not like this winder will only last you 6 months. It lasts us 6 to 9 months because we wind a crazy amount of yarn. But this is a step up from a plastic winder. I'm sorry if you were not done.
No.
Okay. Sometimes I know, and sometimes I just railroad, you know. This is a step up from our plastic winder in that it's got the spinning mechanism just like the plastic winder. It locks onto the table just like the plastic, but it has the band. It has a belt, and you turn this guy, and it turns this guy, and you have the threader over here. It's nicer than the plastic one. It's called the one. Sometimes it's called the mega wool winder. Look right there on the thing, mega wool winder. You can do really, really enormous amounts of yarn. You do need a swift, something that's going to spin to hold the yarn in place that is being wound. If it's in a band, a twist like any of these. But I find once you find the sweet spot on it, and sometimes you don't, it's not as hard to find the sweet spot as on a plastic winder, it does a great job. So
we had one knitter who was like, hey, I think I need to replace the band because my balls are wonky. Like the yarn kept slipping off.
The band can stretch out. You take it off when you're not using it.
Yep. But it also, some yarn just does not want to stay in a cake. And it turned out that was
it was the yarn
it was
more
the
than
yarn.
anything.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to very delicately shift the camera.
Ooh, they get a shop tour too.
Yeah, well, you get to see the boring side of the shop. It's not boring. It's the art supplies, but it's boring for knitters if they don't want to look at the art supplies. And look at our lovely, air system up there, which is why we don't have good air system in the shop. This is our winder right here. Let me see if I can back this up to see the whole thing. There you go. So this is it out of the box. We have the band off of it when we're not using it. I'm not going to show you winding a ball of yarn because the camera is sitting right now where the swift would be. But once we put the band on, and signature refers to all these pretty colors. The Knitter's Pride Signature series has all these pretty colors. We have one that's natural. I think these work better. I mean, they're pretty much the same, but there's pretty colors. Look. So that's how it works. The yarn comes in through here, gathers on here. You get a really nice cake of yarn. And we keep track of how many balls we've wound over here to predict the life expectancy.
Because I didn't write some down.
I haven't written a bunch down either. And then when we're done, we take that off until we're next going to wind it again so this doesn't stretch out. These guys are $135. And if you buy them online, we ask that you pick the larger item shipping, which is $10, which maybe covers about a third of the cost of shipping these. So, all right. Putting this back. Good.
That way it does. Yeah, that's
all right, so that is what is up here. I had a feeling it would distract somebody, but we needed a place to put it. Okay. So what do we have next?
We keep selling winders, and she keeps buying them.
And big sullies are very popular right now, which is awesome. I gotta order more of those too.
Okay. We have Dear Becky and Lizzy. What do you do with leftover balls of yarn?
Oh, that's right.
I have accumulated a bag full, mostly fingering and sport weight. I donated most of the heavier weights to a friend who crochets items for charity. Is there a charity that takes thinner yarn? What do I do with all the little balls of yarn? What to do, or not?
So, hang on. I'm getting something over here. What do you think, Liz, about the charity idea?
I'm not sure. Some charities might take, mix and match yarn is still a thing. I always tell people, save your little scrap, like if you have 5 to 25 grams or even more left over, you can save all those little balls and eventually make something out of all of them. One of my girlfriends, she crochets, and she didn't have any fun yarn. And so I gave her a big bag of just scrap yarn. And she crocheted this scarf that people have offered her $200 for because it's a one of a kind, scrappy.
Well, that's awesome.
And
that might
yeah, she's like, everybody's like, where did you get it? And she's like, I made it, and it's all scrappy. Ravelry has a whole list of patterns.
Search like scrappy,
whatever, stash busting.
You can make
leftovers.
What I was gonna say is my leftovers, a lot of them from recent projects are right here, and my answer would be different than someone at home because I put them here, and Liz uses them for Minion bags of mystery. And I often just move on to the next thing. So this is starting to get a little full. Yeah. I've got leftovers from the night shift and from this sweater and from Christmas presents and all that kind of stuff. We have several thrift stores in the area that will take and sell any yarn from your stash you want to get rid of. I don't know about leftovers though. But Council on Aging thrift store in Etowah, I don't know, Council on Aging thrift stores across the country might replicate what ours does. Ours has a great craft section. My local church that I attend has a resale store where they have knitters, the shop at St. Philip's. And I think Carol was like, shout out to Carol. There were half finished knit items at this shop, and she would take them and finish them and return them so they could be sold, you know. So it takes some investigation to just call the shops and ask them, do you want remnants? They might say, no, there's no way we can sell them. They might have a bargain bin.
You can come up with a pattern too. Like the striped sweater.
Could do this with scraps.
You could do it with scraps. And it doesn't matter if they're sport or fingering, you're going to get
as long as they're in the same
decent mix.
The same rough, like 2 to 3 category near each other. Of yarn, you could do one pattern. I would go with a pattern that fits the biggest yarn you have. And then if you use thinner yarn, you don't necessarily
just look lighter.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have to change needles. It'll be lighter, maybe a little more see-through, but it could be amazing. You might not get stripes of the same width because you might run out of yarn and just start knitting with another yarn.
There was a pattern I found, and I'll try and find it again for Rebecca to put in the comments. That was, you take a size 13 needle, and you can knit every size from super bulky all the way down to fingering, and it's a shawl. So you just reach in your bag and grab a scrap ball and knit until you run out, and then reach in and grab. And the fingering looks like spider web almost, and then you've got the bigger cluster, and
it's really cool. It's you gotta kind of free yourself of, well, this yarn needs to be knit with this needle. Because, I mean, as if you've watched for any length of time, Liz has been educating us that is not the case. So, I mean, it is the case with projects that I'm doing that need to fit and need to hit a certain stitch count. But if you are making shawls, if you're making blankets, if you're making big things that don't necessarily have a certain size in mind,
it doesn't matter.
I would recommend going with the biggest size needle. I mean, you could also change up needles as you go. You'll get edges that do funky things, and that could be cool too. So I saw a post on Knit and Chat. I caught part of it. I did not catch the whole conversation, but I caught part of someone saying, I have all these scraps. I want to knit something, maybe a blanket. What do I do? And one of the people had advised her, if they're different weights, knit strips and sew them together. And that's totally possible. That's if you want to knit with needles that make it look more on gauge or uniform for that yarn. But I think it's really awesome if, like, the biggest yarn you have is super bulky, knit the whole thing on a 15 or a 13, and then the really thin stuff will just look really cool and different, you know.
Or like with the infinity cowl, that's the bamboo bloom.
Yes.
Where if you're knitting like stockinette or whatever, you can purl the bigger stuff as you come
and make it pop out. You know, make the different stuff have a different texture.
There is a pattern that Carol, I found for Carol knits socks. So she has tons of sock leftovers. From socks she's knit for her mom. And the memory keepers shawl, you have all your sock yarn, you buy 2 skeins of like a solid color.
Like a contrast. Okay.
Yeah. She used cream. And then you just pick up a ball and knit till you run out and pick up a ball. And you can plan it if you want to, like a fade. You're holding it with the cream to where there's a solid color that runs through the whole thing.
What we would call marling.
Yep. And you can plan it as a fade or you can do it completely scrappy, it cohesive.
It makes the one color running through it makes it a gentler transition between colors. It kind of unifies. That's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
I like that. What I was going to say is shout out to Kathy who comes to Knit Night. She was working on a shawl that it was a similar idea to the Bamboo Bloom interrupted cowl we have, where but that one's based on the interrupted cowl is based on texture. It's a thin, thick yarn, and when it's thick, you purl. Now this shawl was based on color, and there were 2 colors involved, and I think it's a color changing yarn. And when you hit like the pink, you purl, and when you hit the white, you knit, and that's a cool idea too. So it may or may not apply to your scrappies to do that, but it could be if you're intentional when you switch yarns to switch stitches, then you have something that moves all over the place, but it's like a modern work of art.
Yeah.
And if you're making a scarf or a shawl, then it's a wearable work of art. I think that's really cool. So
and they're just fun. Like, don't be scared of mixing stuff. The easiest way to do scrappy is have all your scraps in a bag and reach in blindly and just start knitting with whatever you pull out. Don't stress about color matching.
It's so hard to do that, but yes.
But most people's stashes are pretty color matchy because most people buy, unless you're knitting for other people,
you colors you like.
Gravitate towards the colors you like. So it's not as scary as it sounds.
You could do the night shift shawl, which combines yarns, like has one yarn doing bubbles and one yarn as the background. And like it's designed to look almost scrappy or like there's tons of yarn involved when you make it with like feeder book or a spin cycle or a yarn that changes as you knit. But if you did it with your scraps, you would get the same effect and use up your leftovers.
I even did mine out of just straight up variegated. So it wasn't even like it was a slow fade. It was just straight up variegated.
So that'd be the same thing. When you need a new yarn, just grab one.
Yeah.
Because the whole point of the night shift is to pick colors that you wouldn't necessarily think of putting together, and you'd be amazed at the results. Like mine has so many colors in it, and people are amazed by it. And it's one of those, I tried not to plan. I tried really hard saying it says to use this now, and I don't know, but I'll use this now, so, or just to be like, you know what, let's just pick one. Once the pattern ran out and I wanted to keep making it bigger, it was just pick a random color. So of what I had left. I think that gives you some good ideas. If anyone wants a follow-up on that, let us know. So, but yes, there's tons of ways to use up leftovers, especially if you're willing to let go of how something should look. Just have fun with it.
And it's scrappy. It doesn't matter if there's a mistake in it. It's scrappy. Nobody's gonna find it because of all the different variations in yarn that you're gonna,
It's like built-in design element right there. It's different. Yay. So, okay. Then we have someone sent us this.
Do you want to read the card?
I will, yes. Okay. So it's just a card. I love getting cards. And it says just a little note, and it has a little musical note on it. That's a Brian joke. Okay. He would have fun with that. Okay. So this says, Dear Becky and Lizzy, I'm unclear about what the different terms regarding color in yarn mean. What is the difference between tonal, slow color changing, long color changing, and regular color changing? I'm not really sure about a regular color.
Maybe more like the variegated with the Lorna's laces versus.
Then there is chainette, tweed, twist, hand painted, multicolor, and dappled. Help. Hope you can get this into one show. We're getting into this show. Baffled in Brevard. So someone local would like to know this. So she's addressing a couple of different things here. And I want to say, if you go back and look on some of our earlier shows, we may have discussed some similar things to this. So that could be supplementary to what we'll say right now. It could be if we don't mention something here that you're interested in, go back and watch that episode and you might find what you're looking for. So I'm going to say she starts with colors, and then she moves to how yarn is constructed. So there's two different things we can address here.
I'm just pulling.
And she's pulling some stuff. Quick. So while you're doing that, I'm actually going to address the part in here that is not quite color. Because she jumps to chainette, some of these, chainette, twist, tweed, hand-painted, multicolor, dappled. Chainette, I would describe as a texture type of yarn rather than a color. It might affect how the color looks. And this is actually a really great example of a chainette yarn. If you get really close, you can see some of the chainette peeking through. If I hold this up, a chainette, see those white little scrappies? It is constructed where there's actually like a woven, we actually were talking about that, I said actually a lot. Oh, we were talking on Knit Night. Jessica was making I-cord, and then she said, I'm going to knit with the I-cord. And essentially that's what chainette is. A lot of chainette is like this. It looks a little more like a chain link fence. You might not be able to see it on there, rather than a twist. Like this is Sammy, and it has a definite twist construction to it. You can see the yarn is twisted around itself there. This one is a twist. It's a loose twist. Lorna's Laces has a much tighter twist, but it's twisted or plied. And that is going to give you a different feel. The Patagonia might only be one ply or two plies and a loose twist. That's going to give you a very different feel than a chainette that is open in the center rather than a thick thing. If we took yarn and simply twisted and twisted and twisted, and that's what spinning is, to make yarn.
Twisting, roving.
Twist, 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 roving. That is twisted, and when you put two twists together, it becomes plied. This one is a chainette that's got fluffy stuff blown into it. I'm going to run and grab a chainette that's a little bit easier to see because it doesn't have fluffy stuff blown into it, but that's very popular right now. But those are two. There's also single ply will look an awful lot like roving. I'll go grab an example of that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that one. I was looking for colors.
No, but I'm talking about construction. Liz is grabbing stuff for color. This will fit into our tweed discussion in a way, but look at that. That is twisted and plied with different colors. It looks marled. I think I can grab these other things. So we have cohesive chunks of our conversation. Let me grab a couple of things I'm thinking about real fast.
Oh wait.
And vamp, Liz, vamp.
Vamp.
Sorry.
Chainettes are designed to be knit on a bigger needle.
It's a fluff.
Then they look.
So
yeah.
She could have kept going, but she doesn't like to vamp.
Yeah, I don't like to vamp.
This is a single ply. See how this is maybe two ply or so. There's extra texture there. And then this is only one strand of yarn, and it's really loosely twisted, if at all. Whereas this is one of the thickest examples of a chainette we have in the shop. Can you see how it almost looks braided? It really is a lot like I-cord, but it almost looks braided there, right? And that means that there's a lot of space in between, and it can become very thin, or can be allowed to be really light and airy and thick. Whereas something that is twisted together and is thick, there's not going to be any air in the middle. So it's going to feel heavier.
Mm-hmm.
And some people like that. And some people want light and thick. So, all of these exist in different thicknesses of yarn. It's just the thicker stuff is a lot easier to show you all on camera. So that kind of addresses a little bit of chainette, like different types of construction of yarn. This guy
is twisted with fluff and stuff, twisted instead of blown in.
Mm-hmm. And the way that it's twisted with different things twisted in there, the texture looks very different, right? So, but the main thing she's asking about is colors. Like if a pattern says it's looking for a tonal yarn or works best with a tonal yarn, or if we list it as tonal or variegated. So Liz has brought out a bunch of things to talk about. And I had pulled a couple too, because one thing she mentioned in here was tweed. She actually mentioned the tweed in with some texture and some paint things. And I just want to get this out of the way because something I've only noticed recently. When I say the word tweed, I'm talking about this or this.
It has tiny little bits,
fleckies
tufts of yarn or fiber twisted in, but they're tiny.
And it's gorgeous, but it provides both color texture and actual texture.
Yeah.
Right. We have the Bfl Tweed. Let me grab one of those real fast. I know I keep popping up, but
it's a thing.
It's a thing.
Because we didn't really prep.
Well, I thought about it in my head.
Yeah.
And then I didn't do much. So this one is Bfl Blueface Leicester Tweed. See those flecks? But I have to be really careful. I don't know who has started this trend or where it's coming from, but we're having more and more people come into the shop saying they're looking for tweed. And they mean this. They mean something that is marled, that is multiple strands of different colors, maybe only two. But when they say tweed and I show them this or this, they go, no. And I show them this and they go, yes. So I often have to ask clarifying questions. And so there must be a project or a yarn or something out there that it's calling itself tweed that is this, that is like marled yarn, multiple strands of colors twisted together. And so that lingo is catching on. So we have to ask questions too.
Chunky blanket.
Yes.
That is not
I was
chunky.
Just thinking about that.
It's super, 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 super bulky. But
the regular yarn world calls chunky something that is thinner than this.
Yeah.
And someone will say, I want to make a chunky blanket. And do you have chunky yarn?
And they're referring to something 3 or 4 times thicker than that.
They're talking about stuff that is like half the thickness of my arm. Because there's one yarn brand out there that people are making a billion YouTube videos about that's called chunky. Because it's not using the standards of yarn that we use here in the shop. It's just decided it's big and chunky. Let's call it chunky. It's like bigger than this stuff right here. So we often have to ask clarifying questions depending on where people are coming from that are asking for certain types of yarn. But for the most part, if someone says tweed, my brain goes to these.
Yep.
Something that has little flecks of, often synthetic, but not always, little flecks of something else in it. We've got some lovely colors of Encore that are tweed because they have these flecks. I've made a whole sweater out of a blue of this yarn, which is Chi-Chi, and it's just gorgeous. But we do have some yarns that do this too, which again, I would call marled, but it's a weird word that is not necessarily known outside the yarn world. So, what do you got there?
For tonal, our best example of tonal, see how it's one yarn. Your sweater, your green sweater is tonal.
When I use the word tonal, I usually am referring to something that has different tones of the same color. Light,
fiber
dark,
space
most of fiber space. There's some fiber space that has different colors in it.
Yeah.
But 90% of fiber space is tonal in that there's lighter and darker patches and chunks of the golden color there. But it's not solid. Like, well, I would say this is solid. It also could be called heathered because it's got really subtle flecks of color, not full-blown tweedy chunks, right? But this doesn't have lighter and darker. It's consistent throughout the skein. So it's not tonal. Even if it's not necessarily all one color, it's even distribution of whatever's going on in it. So
variegated tends to be
when I use
chunks of color.
Yeah, when I use the word variegated, it's something that is super broken up. Like the color changes happen fairly quickly. and they're really different from each other. So like tonal, variegated. Variegated is going to be, there are a few of these that I would almost put in the variegated category because they actually have distinct colors in them.
But they're on the tonal end of variegated where they'll almost a wave in and out of each other.
Yeah. Most of Lorna's laces that we bring into the shop is variegated because you can't necessarily plan what's going to happen with it. It's going to change really fast, and that might pool. That might just be all over busy. It's hard to say, but it's not consistent throughout the whole skein of yarn. It's chunky.
In the skein or in the vein of variegated, there is also dipped, like they call this dipped and dappled, where half of the band is solid and half of the band is speckled. It's still variegated because you know.
And that goes to, she mentioned dappled in her letter. Yeah. And dappled, there's a couple of different words that will often different yarn companies come up with their own lingo for this, but dappled, splatter shot, speckled, all tend to refer to the same. This is also Lorna's laces, but we could call this variegated, but it's not bold patches of color.
It's like somebody did the old paintbrush.
Yeah, somebody just kind of went.
Yeah.
And so half of this skein has that in it. If you hear dappled or splatter shot is what Lorna's laces uses, or speckled, that is usually referring to someone flecked colors. There's little dots of color all over the yarn. And that can be like Madeline Tosh does some really great examples of this. And no, we do not carry Madeline Tosh in the shop, but it's really pretty. So that,
like, yeah, where did it go? I'm having issues. There it is.
And that's different. Why?
Well, zombie barbecue is variegated.
Straight up, like chunky variegated.
Zombie apocalypse is spattered or speckled or
splatter shot, spatter, whatever you want to call it, where there's more flex. It's more like, I bet the first time that, like, it's been really popular, it comes and goes, but I bet the first time it happened, it was an accident. That someone accidentally kind of dye, instead of chunks of dye, was like blah, and when it came out, they went, oh, that's cool. And a lot of people knitting with it went, oh, that's cool. And I'm trying to think, where is, oh, who knows? My Nakia's Infinity Scarf has a lot of different examples on it. If we have time, I'll go run and look for it in a minute. But it's got some splatter shot on it. It has kind of stripey, like sometimes variegated will actually stripe. It will be like, she's got here tonal, slow color changing, long color changing, and regular color changing. Regular color changing I might actually put to either variegated or more of a stripe effect, which we have yarns that do that too. But
and with the striping yarn, they're designed for a certain needle range and a certain circumference,
or else you may not get stripes.
Otherwise, they're just variegated.
Yeah,
it falls under the umbrella of a variegated, but then we have waves.
These are two yarn. Like this is called Heritage Wave. Yeah, I didn't know why I just suddenly had to. But Heritage Wave, they're not all called wave yarns. Feederbrook Farm, this is a more mid-range color changing. Feederbrook Farm, and again, oftentimes they will have 2 plies of different colors, but that will change as you go. And that does something a little more subtle than a stripe. It will color change, but it will color change in a gentle way, but not a super long way. But that's like the night shift. It comes out in, it looks like a bunch of different yarns, but it's really only one. And it will gradually change between them, so it won't look jarring like a solid stripe. And we also have Queensland Perth in our shop that does that. Heritage Wave, but also 220 Wave. Oh, you grab one of those. I missed that. There you go. But yeah, here, if we hold this, is this, yeah, this is the one I did. It's a different dye lot, but it goes through a bunch of different colors, and it will slowly shift, but not super slowly shift through those colors.
Then we have
really long color change. I'm going to grab a couple of things.
this one actually goes through 3.
This is almost what we would call a gradient.
And these are hand
Really long
painted,
colored.
like,
Well, if we get into that hand painted,
yeah,
yes.
like
Hand dyed.
they hand dyed. Somebody actually physically puts the dye on the yarn. Some of it goes through a machine. Some of it is, this is knit into a big long rectangle, painted. And so there's a little bit of overlap between the three colors. And then they pull it apart, steam it, wind it into a cake, and voila, you have a nice gradient.
And some hand dyes are done in pots of water, and some are
Yep.
physically applying like specific colors in specific places. I'm still looking for my Nakias. I was gonna find, here. If Liz, if you wanna show off, this is what the red,
Oh yeah,
the
yeah.
big ball of what she just showed in the orange. This is crocheted in red, and you can see the color change.
Like it changes right in through there. And since crochet eats stuff, it's a little bit, but it's just a long, and then there's the last color change. It's these bullseyes are 200 grams, so it's 2 balls of fingering weight, so it's a lot of yarn to, you know, squiggle through. But you get really cool color changey stuff, lots of different ways.
It tends to be on the more difficult side to do gradients, so they tend to be more expensive.
There it is.
But yarn dyeing, you get super small batch. Lorna's Laces is a little bit bigger batch. Some of the yarn companies do super big batch, and you know.
So this is my Nakia's Infinity scarf, which just has a lot of different yarns in it.
Yep.
Which is really cool. So this
Which
is,
could be a scrappy thing.
there you go. So this right here, this is how Feederbrook Farm knits up, which is like a different colorway of this. So you end up with a stripy look, but a very soft fade between the stripes. So this is like a mid-range color change. It is not, I would call it a slow color change in terms of what Baffled and Brevard is asking, rather than a long color change. That's what Liz was just showing off. This guy right in here, this is the dappled or splatter shot. That's how it knits up. And that's how this stuff knits up. You get speckles everywhere. It almost has a tweed look without actual flecks of texture. There is Noro, has more of a stripy look to it. The Noro is kind of variegated. It's not so much self-striping, but Noro, it's unpredictable, but it's gonna look kind of stripy. This is Sugarbush Motley. It's got longer stripes. It's a little bit fadey between the colors, right? But there's just so much fun stuff going on in here that that shows off a bunch of different effects that yarn can do. This one doesn't have a really long color change in it. One of these balls will look kind of like it does a slow fade, but again, there will be some sections. There are some yarns that actually really slowly change throughout the whole course, not in 3 chunks with minor transitions between them. We don't carry them here in the shop. But they're really pretty. And like Liz was saying, they tend to be more expensive because it's more of a process to make them. You can't just stick them in a pot and throw stuff on them. You have to be very deliberate with how you dye them. But they're really cool. So it's hard to predict how everything's going to knit up. This guy doesn't have, I think I pulled it off. Let me take a look. This guy doesn't have how variegated, full-blown variegated knits up on it, but this is the Lorna's Laces that we don't have in the shop anymore, but it's called Frankenstein's Cotillion. And I was doing Tunisian crochet with it, which was kind of fun. But can you and Tunisian crochet is going to eat up a different amount of yarn than knitting will. But see, we've got patches of color and they come out in different places. We don't have stripes. And sometimes it forms a pattern and sometimes it gets way off track and you can't tell what's going on with it. The backside looks pretty cool too. But see, it's fairly regular patches of color, but there are some patterns that will try to take advantage of this and actually come out with argyle shaping. But that's very specific gauge and very specific yarns. And most yarns are not designed to do it that perfectly.
It's like the self-patterning yarn. There's even yarn that'll do like a fake Fair Isle. And we have just straight up stripes and fake Fair Isle. And people will come in and go, I'm looking for the yarn that does flowers or whatever. There are those yarns out there, but they require a specific gauge on a specific needle in a specific size. Like it.
We don't have that.
Yeah.
Sorry. So for the hand dyed, again, hand dyed versus hand painted. Hand painted often is putting the band out, or even more than that, in a really specific way and doing super targeted dyeing in many ways. I think we even have some in the back on the Pretty Wild that will be called hand painted. But these are two examples of hand dyed that sometimes it's the staining of how they're put into the bands like this. I had a different thought.
I have seen some dyers, like when they get ready to do up the yarn, instead of, like, everybody thinks that the bands are like this big, but it can be a great big wheel based on how.
And then when they put it into
Yeah.
this, it becomes a smaller band.
Yeah.
This is like on that band, if we opened it up, there'll be chunks of color. This does the same thing, but the way that it was skeined, the colors are intermingled more, but it might knit up just the same way that this one does. Though I had grabbed this Daydream Dye Works, we have these lovely, that's variegated in a very different way than this is variegated. But I wouldn't full blown call this spattered.
It's like puddled almost.
It's just fun.
Yeah.
So we're trying to clarify and maybe confusing more. But I think there are some really cool videos out there of, like, when you look at a skein, how to know what it will do when knit up. There are some people who have theories on that, and probably, I can't remember who it was who did that. If you know, tell us below. But I've heard tell of some people who've done some videos of, if you walk up to a yarn show and you see a skein that looks like this, here's how you know what it will do. But for me, it really depends on what I'm making, and how wide or narrow it is going to change how it looks. It's unpredictable. The needle you use will change how it looks.
Whether it's garter or stockinette or lace,
if it's gonna pool, which is one color altogether, if it's going to intermingle, completely depends. And can change.
Yeah. And can change based on the mood of the yarn for the day. Like you've done the hats for your nephew and Alexander, and they're both the same size, same head, same hat, same yarn.
It went up, it decided to start swiveling, but then it stopped swiveling.
Like, and it went back, and yeah.
And sometimes that's because it's hand dyed, and sometimes it's machine dyed, but it's inconsistent. And that could be my inconsistencies as a knitter, or that could be the inconsistency of the ball. So it's one of those, if you expect it to do X, Y, or Z, it might not work, and it might not be the yarn's fault. So yeah, because not everyone knits the same. That's my really big, or crochets the same. That's my really big go-to, and that can change what a yarn is designed to do.
And circling back to our question on what to do with your scraps, all of these yarns will play happy with each other. They're yarn. Have fun.
So let's see, color change, slow color changing, long tonal, we did long color changing, regular color changing, variegated, chainette, tweed, twist, hand painted, and multicolor and dappled. Multicolor, like variegated, multicolor, right? A little more variegated, but they could be under the same umbrella. Dappled, splatter shot, that kind of thing. That one of the things with having so much fun yarn in the world right now means that some things are going to kind of transverse definitions, or have multiple definitions, or anything like that. Tends to get a little crazy, but we hope that kind of helps you figure out a little bit more of the yarn world. And other than
Yeah.
that, play around with it. If you like it, great. If not, rip it out and make something else with it.
It's yarn.
It's yarn. It's fun.
It sticks and string, and you
Mhm.
know,
Ooh, I do want to show y'all,
it's
since we talked
perfectly
about tonal.
acceptable to rip it all out and try again.
Get my steps in today, Liz.
Good.
So we mentioned, and a lot of you have already seen it, but tonal yarn. And we had people that we showed this to outside the shop the other week, and they were amazed that this skein of yarn that is like stark tonal. It's not as the burnished before was mild tonal.
Yeah.
This yarn right here produced this sweater. So sometimes tonal that looks like really crazy and like it's going to be really, really
Wild.
big chunky differences will come out beautiful.
It kind of gives the yarn more life. Instead of just looking completely flat, it adds a little something, not visual texture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm a really big fan of visual texture. So whether that's heather, which is mild visual texture of just fleckies, but just within the yarn, not bumps. Whether it's tonal, it adds body to it without adding physical body, you know. So we have to go because we have a shopping appointment coming in very soon.
Yeah.
We love you all. We miss you all. We are getting so close to 500.
Sign up, like us, all that fun stuff.
At least hit a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we get to 500. We'll have a sale. Really quick, what are your goals for the weekend? Work on a couple
papillons.
Just got at least 3 new ones going. You want to get back to your Milky Way at all?
I might get back. I might do a row. I don't know if I'm going to be able to knock it out. I find switching back and forth to crochet right now, if I get really in the groove of crochet, I just keep going and I don't stop, and it's making my hand issues. So.
I'm gonna try blocking this. I'm noticing as we've been filming, it likes to pucker right between the girls, and blocking is not necessarily going to take care of that.
It's just so soft, and
it's so soft it wants to fill in crevices.
It wants to hug you.
Hug me. I want to block this guy. There's like multiple things I'd like to block, but only one set of blocking pads, so we will see. I want to start my new sweater. I think if I'm gonna try to finish anything else this weekend, it might be the honey moss. So stay tuned for my honey moss shawl to see if I finish that for Tuesday. I'm kind of close, but the rows are getting longer. So we have lots of possible goals, and you're just gonna have to wait and see. You can always come to Knit Night tomorrow night to see what we're currently working on. 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with the shop phone number 828-877-3550. And other than that, we're going to run because there's a lot of stuff on the table, and this is
and we have
shopping.
to get it cleaned up.
Okay. Bye. Have a good weekend.